Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to talk about one of the hardest questions I get asked. I'm going to dive into the details a little bit on why it's a challenging question and why it's not quite as simple as some people assume, but let's just dive on in. Okay, so the question that a lot of people ask me is, Dimitri, I have a finance degree, you have a finance degree, so therefore your advice should be that I should go into quantitative finance. And then when I give people the advice that you have a business background, and I usually ask people to follow up, like, what is your end goal? What are you wanting to do in life? Right? Trying to figure out, like, what are you shooting for as the end goal? Because my end goal is going to be different than your end goal, most likely. Maybe it's not, right? We've got to figure out what's the end goal. And then I try to provide people advice on how to get there. But one of the biggest, I think, misconceptions where people get frustrated, at least some people, they'll say, hey, Dimitri, I have a finance background. And I want to go into quantitative finance because I love investing and I like working with people. And so then I say, okay, great. Well, you have a business background, you have a finance background, you should probably go into traditional finance. And then people get upset and they start arguing with me like, Dimitri, why are you telling me this? Like, you have a finance background and I have a finance background, so therefore we are the same. So I hope many of you realize this is somewhat insulting on many levels, not on your end of like maybe that you're less, but it's insulting on the fact that you just assume like this very simplistic world and somehow like you just sign up for something. Like this is like getting a driver's license, right? You go down, you're over 16, you took this driver's test that everybody takes, and then boom, they stamp you and you're a quant and you go out there and you just be a quant, right? It's really insulting as the industry and the job and everything involved in it. But let's just talk about what it takes to be a quant more so. And then I'm going to talk about some examples on hopefully how you can see this a little clearer. And then I'll follow up with some data on like why it's bad advice for me to actually encourage you to try to pursue quantitative finance when your goals aren't aligned with quantitative finance and also your background education is not quantitative based. So let's just dive on into this real quick. Okay, so again, everything is going to be based on averages of what is most common. So the most common route here is going to be, we'll say quant undergrad. So what does this mean here? This just means quantitative undergrad. It's a little different than what quant means, but this is going to be people with a stats-backed undergrad. This is going to be people with a math, so applied or pure mathematics. This is going to be people with, I don't know, maybe a physics degree. We've seen some of these in the industry. And then it's going to be people with all different types of engineering. So I've seen like electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, aeronautic engineers. I've seen it all. And then finally, you have usually like a computer science person as well, right? They've taken some math, but they're really strong at computer science. Okay, and then what ends up happening is they end up going on after they get this undergrad, and they say, okay, I need to get a quantitative, so I'll spell this out instead of saying quant. So quantitative graduate degree. Grad degree. Okay, and what does this mean? So this is going to be something like a financial engineering master's or PhD, though there's not many of these. This is also like computational finance, mathematical finance. Again, you'll see like a statistics, so a stats one. More specifically, sometimes you'll see an econometrics. And this is just a statistician that specializes in economic problems. But again, it's going to be economics applied to statistics. So you have a lot of math and stats and programming involved, not just a general economics degree. And then again, you'll have math, and of course you'll have computer science, and you'll have, other quantitative degrees. And a lot of these, again, would be like physics, things that are heavy in mathematics. So not business degrees, not finance degrees. But I want to note here that what is a grad degree? So these are going to be masters in some cases. But again, a lot of these are going to be PhDs, okay? So PhDs are always preferred. So when people look at me in the industry, I'm essentially on an educational degree level. I'm the dumb guy, okay? I'm the guy that doesn't have the PhD. When I look around at my colleagues, it's like, oh, they have a PhD in stats, they have a PhD, in econometrics, they have a PhD in pure mathematics or applied mathematics, or right? They're PhDs. There's a lot of these PhDs, and there's some of us masters. But again, we prefer to hire PhDs. So this is the typical route you're going to look at when you want to become a quant. Okay, and this is going to lead me to a different type of comparison here, okay? So this is going to be the comparison. or we're going to call this, an analogy. Because what really confuses people is when you see, for example, something like financial engineering, you assume that it's 50% finance and 50% engineering, right? And when you hear something like computational finance, again, you somewhat assume a 50%, whatever computation is, you're assuming it's math, though it's typically more computer science, and then it's 50% finance. So you're thinking, I'm already halfway there, right? Well, this is actually very, very misleading, and it's completely wrong. So I'll explain why here. The analogy we're going to use here is we're going to say we have a surgeon, and we'll say it's a brain surgeon, for example, something very complicated and complex. And we're going to have a second person down here, and they are going to be a biostatistician. And this biostatistician will say they're going to do pharma research. Okay, so let's define these quickly. The brain surgeon goes to medical school. So back to here, right? He needs a medical degree. So he needs medical school. And of course, this is going to be an undergrad plus, med school. So that's going to be a whole thing in itself. He's also going to have, specialized training for the brain. So for the brain. Okay. And the biostatistician here, again, I'm sure you could do it maybe with an undergrad, but again, most of these are going to be graduate degrees, just like quantitative finance. This person's going to have, so it's going to be stats and biostats, education, but realistically, they're going to have an undergrad, and then they're going to have, a graduate degree of some sorts. So they might have a master's or a PhD in this, and then they have, work experience, which is going to be additional training here to be a pharmaceutical researcher. So training, we'll just set pharma. Okay. And so what's going to happen is both of these people, right, they both work in medicine. But when you go to get brain surgery, right, say you have a tumor in your brain and you need to get it removed, are you going to go to the biostatistician because he has a medical background and a stats background, right? He took biology, I'm sure. I'm sure he understands the medical industry. And he's specializing in pharma, though, which again isn't really related. So I'm going to lay it out on this table and I'm going to let the biostatistician do brain surgery. Or am I going to say, hey, I want this guy here that's a brain surgeon that specialized in brain surgery, right? You're going to want to go to the brain surgeon because brain surgeons clearly know more about brains than biostatisticians. Now, let's look at a different example here. So you have brain surgery, and that's obviously going to be the brain surgeon. And then we're also going to have, let's say we have some drug. So we're going to have some new drug, so drug testing here. When I say drug testing, I mean like pharmaceuticals. Who are you going to trust to say, hey, this new drug, when people take it, so patients take it, it's going to have good results. So we've tested it, we've ran experiments, we've ran the statistical analysis of the drug, has these side effects, and we think it's safe for use. They submit it to like the FDA, for example. They have to provide all this stats and analysis and work, right? Would you want the brain surgeon to say, hey, I gave it to a few patients and things looked all right? Right? It's not a big deal. Just take this drug. You don't really know the outcome. Or would you trust the biostatistician to do it? Right? You would be trusting the biostatistician. So in this example, the brain surgeon is realistically like a finance professional, right? There's not a lot of overlap between the two. They both work in medicine here, but the finance person, for example, is more concerned with financial theory and business. The biostatistician is more like a quant because they're looking at stats and data and analysis. They're not working with customers and clients. They're not going out there and like trying to like do business with other people and talk to people. The quants are just like biostatisticians in the sense that we're looking at data and we're making decisions, and it's very impactful, right? Just like the biostatistician has a lot of impact on drugs, right? They don't want to release something that's not good and kill thousands of people because the drug was bad. But on the same side, the surgeon's saving people as well, but he's saving them with a different methodology. And so I hope you guys realize in this example, right, the brain surgeon and the biostatistician both work in the same industry, but the skills required for the two are vastly different. This is exactly how quantitative finance and finance are related. Yes, they both work in finance, but the skill sets are very different. And just to talk a little bit about traditional finance and quant finance and all that. So again, for finance, you're going to be making decisions for corporations. So, right, they do decisions for companies here. And if you work at a bank, right, you're going to be working with clients and you're going to be selling them products or services here. And you might even be working, like, for example, in investing, okay? And you might be doing a lot of Excel work, for example. But a lot of this is all going to come down to financial theory. So you're going to discuss in a lot of ways. I meet with finance people and talk about trading and stuff just because it's fascinating, right? And they'll be talking about, I don't know, like interest rates. And they'll be talking about, this company is supported up and has a horrible PE, so price to equity ratio. Tesla, for example. I'm a big fan of Tesla. I've held them for a while, but they start talking about, Elon Musk is a horrible business person, so he's bad at business. And they'll talk about how the company has all these bad ratios, like PE, for example. And, they've never made a profit. And because of this, right, they would not invest in them. And they have all this theory and logic, and they like to talk about things, okay? Quants, on the other hand, are a little different. And when you get into investing, it kind of starts bleeding over, so it can be challenging to see the difference. But a quant, or we'll just call them, I don't know, an analyst, we'll call them a quantitative analyst. We can call them risk professionals. I don't know. You can call them investors, researchers. But the difference here is that these quants, when you go in to make decisioning and stuff, they're not really concerned with clients. They're not concerned with decisions in companies. They're not concerned with going to meetings and talking to people and like putting all this logic and theory together. Quants need to do a lot of stats and math. So again, quants shine in financial engineering because financial engineering is very, 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 very heavy in mathematics. So someone who has like a pure math degree or an applied math degree, they're going to blow someone out the water that has a stats degree. That's just how it is. Okay. They have this background. They're going to be doing a lot of programming. So like the daily job here is like, I need to predict. So I need to predict here. I need to predict, for example, expected losses. So this is expected losses. This is all estimation and models. So this job is going to be focused on doing like stats and math, but they're going to be running all this stuff in like R or SAS or Python or C++, for example. But this job is a guy just sitting here doing research, looking at distributions, doing statistical analyses, running calculations, and looking at stats theory applied to finance. So again, the majority of this job is going to be all these STEM skills, where the finance skills make up a very small portion. So if you look at finance, for example, let's just say you have 4 skills. You have finance, you have math, you have stats, and you have computer science. For a quant, realistically, these 3 probably make up 95% of the job. So yes, it's helpful to know finance, but it's really not going to take you very far. And these are required. Like you have to have these. There's no way you can do the job without it. It's just how it is. Okay. Someone in finance though, the finance portion, this might be like 60%, maybe 70%. I don't know. Something like this. And yeah, they do a little bit of math, but it's not math, right? It's more of arithmetic and simple equations like CAPM, for example, or discounted cash flow models, right? These aren't predictions. These are realistically just calculations in many ways. Yes, you can estimate things and add them in as predictions. I know. But this piece for them is going to maybe be the last 30%, but realistically, it's more like soft skills. So I'm the first one to admit quants don't really have a lot of soft skills. We're not usually good at working with people, but soft skills is, maybe Excel, for example, /SQL. So these are like the technical skills for usually a finance person. Again, they're not going to be working in like C++, Python, R, and SAS as much. It's shifting a little bit, so they can be doing that as well. But again, this is probably like the other 30%. So yes, we all work in finance together. Yes, we work across the line somewhat because finance people do all their sales and marketing and their products and their designs, and like they do like mergers and acquisitions, for example. Quants don't usually work in that area because there's just not a lot of data. All the decisioning down in the quant side is data, data, data. The finance side is more or less the interpretation of the data. So again, if you want to interpret the data, you go into the finance side, but you're not really going to be doing a lot of the quant stuff. So they're just different worlds, different skill sets. And let's keep moving on with this video here. Okay, so now we've already covered kind of the process to becoming a quant. And I should note here, yes, there are people that have crazily different backgrounds. You might end up with an undergrad in, I don't know, English or something. And then you end up with like, I don't know, a master's in business or like an MBA or something. And then you knew somebody who brought you in as a quant and you worked there for, I don't know, 10, 20 years. And then it ends up turning out you end up becoming a quant over time or something. There's always an outlier. Even if you look at older people, for example, many of them only have like a bachelor's in math. And then they're quants, or a bachelor's in physics and they're quants. It's just because grad degrees weren't as common then. Over the years, they've gained all this additional math and skills, but that's kind of dying out. Like if you want the best odds, you have to go with getting a graduate degree, as that's usually used as a filter if you want to get into quant finance. And then to look at this from a different perspective here, okay? So let's say you have me. So you have me. So this is, fancy quant, and I sit right here. And you say, okay, there's me, and then there's you. So you're the one asking the question. And then you say, okay, I have a finance degree. Fancy Quant's got a finance degree. And you say, okay, and I have a finance degree, right? These are equal. I get it. So then you say, because these are equal, therefore, since you went on to become a quant, I can go on to become a quant. I have no disagreement with this argument. Okay, I want to make that clear. No disagreement with this argument. However, if you look at the odds, this is why it's challenging for me to make the advice or give advice to people in general, okay? If this was as simple as it was, like this is like getting a driver's license. Like you go, you get a finance undergrad, you get a financial engineering master's here, and then you go and you become a quant and you're done. I would get it, right? You just check in the boxes going through the process. But here's the real problem on why it's hard for me to look at this image and tell you, yes, you have a finance undergrad and I have a finance undergrad, so therefore you can do it. So let me just make out a bunch of lists here on why this is not necessarily true, and why it's somewhat dangerous for me to say, if you have a finance degree, you should go into quantitative finance. That's bad advice. And I'll explain why here. So one, the reason I got accepted, I believe, to the University of Michigan, which is where I went to, is because I had a good statement of purpose. So I had to shoot a video and talk about why I wanted to do it. The fact that they had 2 finance degrees in their program, I think is actually pretty crazy. Like it was a massive risk on their end because we weren't that qualified. So yes, my statement of purpose helped me get in. 2, I was unqualified. Okay. I'm not denying this, right? This resulted in just like pure hell. Simple, right? Just done. Pure hell. Do you want to go through pure hell? Sure, go for it. The third piece here, which a lot of people don't know, is I actually ended up taking off. So I taking off 1 semester to study. And when I mean study here, I don't mean I looked at online videos and stuff. Like that's a huge waste of your time. I looked at math textbooks. I looked at my financial engineering textbooks. I went through my stats textbooks. So you get the point here. I took an entire semester and went back and read all this material and said, I don't understand all of this. This makes no sense. Why don't I understand it? And then I had to go to the library and get another textbook. And one of my classmates actually in my applied economics master's had this massive textbook that was Calc 1, 2, and 3 all in one that they used at their university. I borrowed it from him. I went and said, hey, can I use this? I don't understand. He's like, sure, why not? I don't need it. So I'm going through and I'm taking an entire semester only going through textbooks. I'm like putting in the usual like classes. I'm not taking a semester off. I'm studying for an entire semester to better prepare to be able to do that. So this is a lot of what I had to do that. And then on top of that, right, so something else, which I should note, let's scoot all this over here. Okay, so something else to note here is the number of factors to predict finance to quant finance, right? The simple model that essentially is being drawn and people draw the conclusion to is they say, okay, let's say quant finance, so quant fin, This is equal to some regression, we'll call it alpha, plus beta coefficient. And essentially you have a finance undergrad. And because you have finance undergrad, there's some sort of formula. You just do this and boom, you're a quant. This will automatically lead you to an MFE degree, which then will automatically lead you to a quant degree. Okay. This is ridiculously absurd and way too simple. This is not how life works. I made lots and lots of decisions, tough decisions. I try to show this in my videos a lot, right? It's not fun. I didn't come from the optimal background. I switched careers, right? I went from being like a neurosurgeon or a brain surgeon, right? And I switched over and I quit everything and I threw it all away and I went and I became a quant, a statistician, a mathematician, a lowly math person, stats person, sitting with textbooks, writing out math in the back dark corner of our office building. That's what I did, okay? It's not as simple as you make it here. But realistically, what other factors could be predicting in here? Well, one, work experience. So I don't mention this a lot, but I worked at a startup company, and by the time I graduated with my undergrad, I had 6 years of work experience. A lot of this, again, was in IT. So it's like the hardware, understanding computer side. I did a lot of programming, so that's computer science. And then I did a bunch of accounting, and I did corporate finance and other stuff. This doesn't matter. It didn't have a large impact on me. Okay, I understood the financial products very well, but it didn't help me with math, didn't help me with stats, didn't help me with all the classes I took. The business classes I did take though, like they were super easy because I already had this background. But again, it's not adding a lot of value. My job's not based in doing finance or accounting or any of that. So again, there's work experience. And then we could break this down even further. Like, I don't know, what's your personality? Right? And then that leads me to the question of, on top of that, like, what are you willing to lose? What will you sacrifice? At this point in my career, like after I graduated undergrad, finance degree, worked at a startup company, I guess technically I had 7 years here. Scratch that, 7 years. Because I had 4 years, 2 years before, 1 year after, gives me 7. What are you willing to sacrifice? I had nothing. I had nothing. I had nothing to lose. I had nothing in my bank account. I was living at home with my parents and I was married, right? I had nothing to lose. I just moved out, took on $70,000 in debt for my degree. My wife got a master's. She took on more debt. At the end of the day, guess what? I could have lost everything. I could have ended up homeless, right? I mean, what are you willing to sacrifice? I see so many people that draw this conclusion, right, about the finance. Like, you have a finance degree, I have a finance degree, therefore I will be quant. Like, it's just absurd. But most of you are the ones saying, Dimitri, I want to get an online degree, right? I'm already working. I can't afford to take time off. And, I can't afford to get debt. I get it. Some of you aren't going to have access to capital. I was lucky that I was a US citizen, right? The government would loan me money or lend me money here. But at the end of the day, right, I took a huge risk. I could have graduated and then been unemployed. Many of my colleagues, so in the original financial engineering masters, ended up not going into quantitative finance. Vast majority of them. On the applied economics side, most of them don't want to be quants. They didn't do quants. They didn't take the same classes as me because they didn't want to do that. So they went on to do other really cool careers. Like, I give them thumbs up. Some of them have awesome tech jobs and stuff. I'm kind of jealous, right? But again, they went and did something different. They took different classes, different education, right? They wanted to do something different. So that's different. But what are you willing to sacrifice? Right? I was willing to throw everything away to make this happen. If you're not willing to do that, you're not in the same boat. So I'm just kind of pointing that out. And then back to the personality thing, right? That's part of the personality, the drive, the determination. What are you willing to risk on this, right? Everything can blow up and you can get nothing out of it. It's a very, very likely possibility in many scenarios. So, and then personality again, right? You could do like a Myers-Briggs. So what is your characteristics? Who are you? What are you? Are you super dedicated? Are you not super dedicated, right? Again, the sacrifice comes into here, the drive, the self-learning that I mentioned before here. So over here, all of this compiles into who I am and how I made it. So it's not as simple as like you just go get a degree, you have a similar undergrad, and therefore it all works out. Okay, and then finally, let's wrap this up on the advice in itself. So let's just look at the data. So I've been in the career, I've come across hundreds of people. I have no clue how many people I've came across. I don't know if it's 100, 1,000, 10,000, I don't know. Definitely not 10,000 though. But I've came across a lot of people in the industry. And out of all those people, there's me, right? Finance undergrad, and there's one other person. We'll call them LC, okay? That's it, guys. That's all I've seen. This is the only quants I've ever seen with a business background. So I don't know. You can do the math. Let's say it's 100 people, right? This is going to be 2%. This number is probably close to, like, I don't know, 400 to like 600 people, something like that. And then, of course, this number is going to go to a very small number. And I've actually had subscribers email me, so I'll do this again. You have subscribers. I've had a subscriber or two say, Dimitri, I had a finance background. I made the attempt, and now I'm unemployed. So this piece that actually like makes me actually really sad. Like it's a risk, right? And this leads me to the other thing of like, you know, I don't want to mislead you. So what do I mean when I say this? Like the amount of work that goes into this is ridiculous when you're coming from a business background. It's a lot of work, and I give a lot of applause to those that have a quantitative undergrad and then get a quantitative graduate degree and then go on to get a career. Like that's a whole challenge in itself. Now coming from an undergrad where you're missing 2 years of specialty and only like math and stats and trying to catch up on 2 years of material and then segue into a graduate degree and then get them to accept you and then finishing the degree and then getting the job, like it's a lot of work no matter what you do. So that's part of it. The other part is I don't talk a lot about money because I don't think this is a main driver and I don't think you will succeed if you're in it for the money. So for example, right, I don't show my house, I don't show my cars, I don't show anything, right? I'm not flexing, okay? So I'm not bragging here. I don't think it's important. Again, you don't do it for the money. If you do it for the money, you're probably not going to end up making it in the industry. I don't want to glamorize this either. Like I'm essentially like, I don't know, we'll just draw a little person here, right? I'm sitting in a desk at a chair and I'm literally have a desk in front of me and I have like some textbook probably open on this side and I have a stack of papers here and I have, of course, a computer monitor and I have a keyboard and I'm just doing math. So, well, I'm doing stats. I'm reading statistical theories. I'm looking how to apply these. Somebody built a model and submitted it to me. I work in validation now. I'm just reviewing statistical theory here. That's it. That's all I do. I just do stats. It's just applied to finance. So, right, this for me though, like this is like, it's exhilarating, it's exciting, it's fun, I like it. And I want to show you guys like, if you like math and stats and computer programming, for example, like this is an awesome career. You should go do this. But I don't want to mislead people in thinking that like there's all this money in it and you're like living the high life and like you don't even need to know stats and math. You can just get a business degree and all. Like, a business person is trained to do business and a quant's trained to do quant. I think there's a very difference, as we talked about earlier. My job doesn't really entail a lot of like meetings and working in teams and stuff like that. I don't interact with a lot of people. I can actually work from home for almost my entire job. So again, it's hard to weigh this, right? I want to weigh that it's fun and exciting on one hand, but also you shouldn't like think it's greener on the other side and think that finance is dying and you're going to like run over and become a quant. It's a lot of work and I don't want to mislead you in many ways because yes, this can lead to horrible results and bad life decisions. So I'm just going to wrap this up here and thank you guys for watching this video in general, but this is one of my biggest, most struggling questions to answer because there's so many factors, right? If you're someone who has a finance undergrad, I believe strongly you could switch careers. But I wanted to let you know it's a lot of work, right? It's not going to be like you just go out and apply for masters and it happens. A lot of times you apply for masters like me the first year and you get rejected by all the ones that you wanted to go to. And you have to reapply a second year and try to figure out how to improve your GRE scores, how to improve your statement of purpose. Your GPA is what it is at this point. Like you're kind of stuck. It's challenging. It's difficult. Everybody's situation is different. But it's a really hard question to answer because if you really, really, really want to be a quant and you enjoy stats and math and computer science and you like finance somewhat too, it's a great career. It's amazing. But on the same token, I don't want people to get misled and be thinking that like this is super easy. I'm the smartest person in the world because yes, business degrees tend to make you overconfident when you don't really know what's going on. And so trying to explain the difficulties and the challenges and trying to show you guys a clear picture and then allowing you to make the decision is there. But it's possible. It's also possible for me, for example, to quit my job today, to throw out everything I know, to go to medical school, eventually become a neurosurgeon and be a brain surgeon, right? It's possible. But again, I'm not willing to make those sacrifices. I don't really like brain surgery. I don't like medicine. I don't like blood, for example. It's not a good fit for me. And so I'm hoping you guys get the takeaway here that it's not always greener on the other side. Like quant finance is not better than finance. Finance is not better than quant finance. They're different jobs, different areas, same industry. But again, that's kind of the takeaway from the video. I'm hoping more of you understand this in a clear aspect. Like I'm not trying to say that you're not as good as me, so you shouldn't go into finance. I'm just saying, given your background, it'd be a lot less effort and you'd probably be happier staying in finance for most of you. But there are a few of you that it might end up benefiting you to get out of it. But realize it's a complete career switch. You're going to have to do more education, more training. It's a lot of work. So anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, until next time.